Hi there, welcome to another video. So today we're going to talk about divination and protection. So since it is October and we have the thinning of the veil, we want to make sure that whatever you're conjuring, whatever you're practicing, you do it safely. So I want to show you some simple tools, some simple things that you can do just to begin your journey. So beginning in divination, you may have been born with a sixth sense, some sort of mediumship or psychic ability. That's normally how it occurs, is that you're just born with this intuitiveness. And over time, you need to develop that. So it's like someone who has a natural talent for basketball or something. They can have a natural talent for it, of course, and they're naturally gifted for it. They have the physique for it and everything. But you can't get to that level of a professional, like an athlete, without actually practicing. So in the same way, you need to practice your divination as well. So this is something that you need to make sure that you develop over time, and then you'll be able to understand the nuances of it. So these are some simple things that you can do in your daily life. That way you can practice your divination and your conjuring, and you should also be practicing protection as well. So if you're going to be messing around with spirits, Uncle Iroh said it the best: the spirits are not to be trifled with. So make yourself your regular morning coffee. Pick a special cup for your ritual cup. Alright, so this is the same exact cup that my abuelita has. And so I use it just in my daily life, and that way I feel close to her, and then I feel like we're having coffee together. And I will pour myself a cup. Now, you can use whichever coffee you want, you can use whichever kind of cup that you want, as long as it has significance to you. That's what really matters. Now, I do add some spices into it, so it's best if you create the mixture in itself every time that you have a cup, but just for time's sake, I'm gonna show you. So in this mixture, I have brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, cracked fresh black pepper, and ginger. Now all you need is just a little bit in your cup and then some cream to taste. Just like that. So add in your coffee. You're gonna have this be your morning ritual, like your meditation time. You shouldn't be distracted. This is like your morning prayer quiet time. So get yourself a notebook and write down your goals. So these are things that you're going to try to manifest. You want to make sure that you are concentrating, putting your intention into them as you're having your morning coffee. And then afterwards, when you're done drinking your coffee, you read the coffee grounds the same way that you would for tea leaves. Now, sometimes there can be different techniques according to whichever path it is that you follow. Certain Romani or Turkish people will have their own way of interpreting coffee grounds, but it's very similar to reading tea leaves. I'd recommend getting yourself a little booklet like this, just an instruction manual on how to read tea leaves. Make sure that however you read it, that the little handle part is in your dominant hand. If you're left hand dominant, then you will read it with that on the left hand side. I know a lot of these pictograms, a lot of these graphs will say to always have it on the right hand side. To me, that doesn't make sense if you're left-handed. Plus, there's other resources online that you can look into for interpreting all these different shapes. There's different lithomancy graphs that can be applied to a teacup according to how that stuff lands in there, because lithomancy isn't just about casting lots or casting stones. It also is determined by how stuff just lands in the chart. So if you're into astrology, lithomancy charts can be perfect for you, and this can be a great way of practicing that in accordance with your zodiac charts. So when you're reading your lithomancy diagrams or the circles for them, they also correlate to the different houses of lithomancy. So there's 12 houses, and they all go in accordance with zodiac charts. So if you're into astrology, that'd be a great way of practicing and working with your divination. Now, of course, I don't think it's necessary, but if you want, you can also get a purple candle, so one of these 7-day candles, and you can start lighting them whenever you're having your coffee, and then just put it out when you're done. It's not necessary, I don't think, but it definitely helps you to concentrate and to get in the mood for it. Especially if you're working with deities and stuff like that, you can have a certain 7-day candle that you prepare specifically for that deity as well. So if you're working with spirits, that'd be a great way of practicing with them. And then when it comes to working with spirits, make sure that you are developing a relationship with them. So something that I see online a lot is that people treat their spirit guides or their deities as wish fulfillment. So these are not just birthday candles for you to wish upon. They're not there just to be your servants. These are primordial spirits. These are primordial deities. They're transcendent spirits that are meant to guide you in your wisdom and your spiritual journey. They're not there to just worry about your exam tomorrow. So sometimes you have to understand when you need to take responsibility for your own consequences, and other times when you need to actually seek guidance for wisdom. So I think that's something that some spiritual discernment would definitely help. So when it comes to working with spirits, just make sure that you are understanding that there is a mundane answer and then there is a metaphysical answer. So sometimes you need to consider the mundane answer first, and I would definitely recommend this before going on to the metaphysical answer. Sometimes there are problems that arise. These can be just mundane issues that you deal with yourself, and sometimes when the evidence presents itself, it can be metaphysical or supernatural, and that's when you can ask for help from your spirit guides. But just understand that you need to build up a rapport and a relationship with these spirits. Otherwise, they're just not going to work with you. Now, in certain pantheons like the Loa or the Orisha, you're born with these spirit guides. So you're born with these spirits. And then you can also work alongside with them with other spirits. But understand that according to whichever kind of spirits that you're working with, they may not work well together. So certain spirits, they don't get along. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. I would recommend, if this is something that you're interested in doing, do research for an entire year before working with any spirits. Because like Uncle Iroh said, the spirits aren't to be trifled with. If you're going to piss them off, that's it. You screwed up. And it's really difficult to actually build up that rapport. So whatever you do, make sure that you're doing it correctly and you know what you're doing. I would recommend, if you need to, get a mentor. This isn't something for beginners. This is why it's in the advanced tier for my Patreon followers. So whichever spirits it is that you're working with, understand that there are beginner spirits that you can work with. So like your ancestors, there are certain spirit guides that are definitely very user-friendly. If there are certain spirits that are presenting themselves to you when you're first waking up to using your abilities, your spiritual mediumship or psychic abilities, understand that there are going to be trickster spirits that are trying to mess with you. So these trickster spirits are going to try to fool you to thinking that they are the spirits that you want to work with. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind, that when something is too good to be true, it probably is. So make sure that you take precaution and that you have protection. Don't ever conjure anything, or don't ever try to contact something that you don't know how to banish. Make sure whatever you're working with, you know what you're dealing with, and you know how to banish them also. So make sure that protection is the number one key. And then when you're dealing with these spirits, make sure that you're not just doing it to be performative, that you have a goal in mind and that you have a reason for contacting them. So this reason doesn't just have to be, contacting them for a favor, or contacting them, for, doing something like wish fulfillment. You can also just build up a rapport, build up like a relationship with them, and that will create a stronger bond with that spirit or with that deity that you're working with. And I think that would be the best way, just to open up and say, you're welcome here, and make them feel like they're welcomed, that you're someone that they can work with, that they can trust, and just building that relationship with them. Because a lot of these spirits are actual people that existed before, but they're deceased, and that there's someone that you can work with, in your divination, in your conjuring. And then other spirits are nature spirits. So these are spirits of nature. They are entities of nature and of that energy. And then, of course, every culture around the world is going to have their own interpretation of spirits. So they could have, like, demonic spirits or guardian angel spirits. It's all different according to whichever culture, whatever kind of path you're working with, too. Now, in terms of divination, a lot of people will start with tarot cards. And I think these are great for beginners because they come with instruction manuals. So I think it's great That way you can understand the different charts, the different ways of reading them, the symbolism behind that, and anyone can start by doing that. However, it can be a lot for people, just because it's a lot of cards and it's a lot of stuff to read to understand the meaning behind that. And then it can be pretty subjective according to the reader and what their technique is, or how they personally read the cards. So how they interpret these cards, it can be really subjective. Now in Latin America, we do have our own oracle decks as well. So La Loteria Mexicana, even though it's used for a bingo game, the etymology and development of it is related to the tarot cards. So that's why you have certain cards like La Luna, El Sol, El Mundo, that are really similar to the tarot cards, is because they did come from that original Marseille tarot, La Estrella. So these are actually part of the tarot deck, at least in part, and then the rest of it is original to Mexico because they wanted it to be like its own unique culture, so it was developed in Central America. And then we also have Briscas, so La Baraja Española. And these cards you can also read in a very similar way to tarot because they have the 4 suits. They have the clubs, coin, cups, and espadas. So you can read these in a really similar way. It's basically like reading tarot but without the major arcana. But they also don't have queens, so that's another thing to keep in mind. There's no major arcana and there's no queens. Now, if card reading isn't your thing, I would also recommend casting lots. So this is essentially junk that you pick up but has significance to you. So each and every single one of these, it can be a cartoon character, it can be a marble, it can be a bottle cap, a key, a special ring, a button, like a cinnamon stick, anything. Like, it can just be, you know, hagstones, bullet casing. It can be anything. As long as it has significance to you personally, you will give meaning to each and every single one of these tiny little items. So, sea urchin spikes. I use these for arrows when I'm reading it. So it means it's pointing to another one of these items. So, for example, I have 2 marbles in here. One of them is yellow, one of them is blue. One represents happiness, one represents depression. So this is how you would read them, essentially. So I have a little thing that's a flower. This represents friendship, or, you know, truth, wholesomeness, blooming, stuff like that. So you will give your own personal significance to these items. I would recommend keeping it under about 20 items or so. Any more than that, it just gets really difficult to read. But collect your items. This can take some time also because you'll need time to actually collect them, and then make sure that it's not just junk. They do have a certain significance to you, and sometimes it can present themselves to you as well. Now, I would be careful just picking up junk off the street, obviously, and some of it can be like from fairies, so be careful about that as well. Don't just pick up stuff that seems really ominous, so that can be kind of dangerous. Make sure you keep that in mind, because fairies will literally like leave stuff for you to pick up, and that's a contract with them that you aren't aware of. But collect these items over a period of maybe like a year or so. It took me about a year. And then when you're ready, you know, list off, literally like write them down if you need to. List off what each and every single one of them means. That way when you're reading them, you can refer to that list. But essentially, you're gonna want a bowl of some kind. It can be like this. It can be, you know, like a ceramic bowl. It doesn't matter. And then you can get yourself a little chalkboard. I made myself one that was bigger just so I can actually like throw them and cast the lots. But it's just a TV tray. And then I painted them with black chalk paint, so that way I can do like graphs and stuff. But it's essentially this graph right here. So the center is going to represent yourself. And then you have your past, future, your subconscious, and your conscious. And then anything in the corners, just disregard, it doesn't matter. But this is how you're going to essentially read it. And then however these items land on here has different significance to it. So look up bone reading. Bone reading is a form of divination as well that's very similar to casting lots. So however these items lay upon each other. So for example, if this is underneath the other item, or if one of the marbles is inside of one of these squares, or if one of these sea urchin spikes is pointing to the future, your subconscious or something, you can read that according to your situation. So yes, it is subjective, but you can also interpret a lot of stuff from this because it's more intuitive than reading tarot cards. You give it your own meaning, so that way it's more significant to you and what you are reading into it. Now, you can practice this however often that you want to. I think that daily readings are maybe a little superfluous, so you don't really need to read every single day to understand what the hell is going to go on in your life. I think maybe like once a week or so. So if you're working with a deity or something and their day is on Thursday, then you can use this time for divination. You can have your little coffee. You can have your little candle for them. And then you can concentrate on practicing your divination. So whether it be with casting lots, or whether it be with reading cards, whatever form it is that you prefer, just try them out. And if it doesn't work, then oh well. Because I've tried forms of divination and I'm just like, this isn't for me. And that's fine. Just keep trying different stuff because there's a whole list of divination techniques that you can do. So hydromancy, pyromancy. Let me look up this list here. Yeah. So I will put this in picture form, that way you can pause and look at it. So one of my pages, I basically list off every kind of divination from A to Z, and I just alphabetized it. There you go. Let me check it out. Oops, sorry. I'll take a picture of this and post it as well. And then I went into detail. So all the little asterisk ones, I just went into further detail. And this is the lithomancy stuff I was telling you about. So you have different charts that correlate with your astrological sign, your zodiac sign. And this is essentially what you read inside of the cup. So when you're reading your coffee grounds, this is essentially the graph. And then, let me open up this page without any of the pages falling out. Oops. And then these are the 12 houses of lithomancy. Now this is all information that's available online. You can just look this stuff up. You know, if you Google it, then you can find more charts as well. And you can find more information. But I use these charts pretty frequently. See, this one here is really similar to the chart that I wrote down on the chalkboard. That's essentially the chart that I'm using, but I'm in a square form instead of a circle. And then here's the stuff for osteomancy or bone reading. I'm sorry, I have so many like loose pages in here. There you go. Yeah, Katie, divination. There you go. I'll post pictures of this, but this is essentially the shapes that you'll read. So if it creates a triangle, it means something. If it's perpendicular, if it's parallel, if it creates an X, if it's pointing this way or that way, according to how all these items land. And like I said, these can be any sort of items that you want. You can give them fire symbols, you can give them female, love, luck, bad luck, evil eye, whatever sort of symbolism that you want to give it. Also, you can read casting lots or casting bones, bone reading on animal hide. So if you have animal hide like leather or something, or just like the animal fur, however they land can also have a certain meaning to it as well. So that's another form of doing it. If you don't want to do it on a chart, you can be extra fancy and do it on a pelt. So basically I have some rabbit pelts in here that I use specifically for divination. So I'll put these out when I'm reading my tarot cards, or if I want to cast lots, I guess I can do them on here too, but I mostly use like my my little TV tray table. So one represents subconscious, one represents the conscious, and then you would have your little lots in here, right? And then according to how they land, that's how you would read them. So according to that animal chart that I showed you, you would just and see how it lands. So this is just the reading for the subconscious, and then you can read it for the conscious, or you can read them together, but you would have to like make sure that it lands on both of them. So it can take some practice just to make sure it lands properly, but I would read it just subconscious first and then conscious. They can be read in tandem, but that's way more difficult, I think. It's something that you have to understand from reading lots or casting lots is that it's also dependent on how you throw them. So sometimes when you throw it, you can mess up, so you can just throw it again. But when you throw it, you have to concentrate on what your intention is, what your question is, and then that way you'll read it according to how it all lands. Now this is a really bad one. I would redo this because everything is on top of each other. It's not spread out enough. So the way that I usually do it is on this TV tray table that I painted black, so that way I can do chalk and stuff on top of this. This is the black chalk paint. So I would take my lots right in here. I usually mix it up. I say a prayer or I ask a question, and I'm concentrating as I do it, and then I'll cast my lots. That's usually what it looks like. So like I said before, the chart says anything on the corners. This one's way out there, so that doesn't fucking matter at all. And I just stick it right back in the bowl. So what else? This is in the corner. That's gone. These are basically in the corner, so that's gone. And then I would just read the rest according to the chart. Now, if you don't have a nice little tabla or something, you can literally just use sidewalk chalk and then draw a circle or a rectangle on the sidewalk and then just cast your lots that way. You don't have to use like specific items like this, even though it does make the reading more powerful and more significant, so you can interpret more specifically if you do have specific items to pull from. Understand that knowing the technique and understanding the method is more important than having the tools. You can do divination just with matches and a bowl of water. You can do divination with just a cup and an egg. So the tools, it doesn't have to be fancy. Understanding the method and knowing how it works, how to read things specifically and doing it correctly, that's more important. So even if you have just sidewalk chalk, hell, you don't even need sidewalk chalk. Just go to the sand and the dirt and draw it with your finger. You can do that. It doesn't matter if you have fancy tools. It doesn't have to be expensive, because your ancestors didn't use much either. They just used earth, grounding, spirit, and herbs. Just for the hell of it, let's read some of these pages that fell out. Synchronicity, when certain events in life are meaningful coincidences with the divine or magical intervention. However, keeping in mind that certain correlations do not always equal causation. At times there are mundane explanations or solutions rather than divine or magical explanations or solutions. As lame as it sounds, you don't always need to do spell work or witchcraft, but just use your common sense. Please pay attention to that. Okay? Next, you have cowrie shell divination. So this is also another thing that's specific to Latin America. I'm so sorry that my handwriting is teeny tiny. It's just how it is. It's always been like that. But cowrie shell divination is something that's specific to Latin America and to African practices as well. So this is definitely something that you can look up. There's Santeria divination as well. So these cowrie shells will they will align with different meanings. So in this one, you can have anywhere between 16 to 20, I believe. So the major Urdu is 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. The minor Urdu is 5, 6, 7, 9, 11. So according to how the cowrie shells line up, when you're casting them, when you're throwing them, you have about 16 or 20, depending on your technique. And however they land, face up or face down is the meaning behind it. So that's how you read cowrie shells. It's not so dependent on where they land. It depends on how they land, if they're face up or face down. So let me give you an example. This would be, oh my god, come on. So this would be face up, this would be face down. So a lot of people interpret this either as an eye or as a mouth. So a lot of people will say like mouth up or eye open, or I guess like mouth down or eye closed. Now, other forms of divination in Latin America, you can use frijoles, you can use beans for casting them as well, so casting lots. You can use maíz. Maíz is very popular in Central America, influenced by the Maya and the Aztec. There are different forms of reading that. You can look up, give me just a second. These two books right here, Cleansing Rites of Curanderismo and American Brujeria, they talk about specifically Mexican, Central American divination and different forms of that. And now that we're getting closer to Halloween, I want to make sure that people understand that whatever you're working with, you know, if you're doing stuff in a graveyard, if you're conjuring, that you do so respectfully to the dead as well. Because a lot of people will literally exploit the dead and create that chaos. They create this disrespect, and that will bounce back on them as bad luck. You don't want that, all right? Don't piss off the spirits. Make sure that whatever you're doing it with respect to the dead. So don't think of them as just spirits and, you know, mythical creatures or whatever. These are people that existed. Okay, this is someone's grandma, this is someone's aunt, this is someone's sister, this is someone's brother, someone's uncle, someone's great-great-grandpa. So this isn't just somebody for you to play around with. Make sure that whatever you're doing it respectfully. You're creating a rapport, you're creating a relationship with this person. All right? And then if you're working with nature spirits or entities like the Orisha or the Loa, that you make sure that you give them the respect that they deserve. So you're not just doing stuff willy-nilly. You're not syncretizing them with like Greek deities just because certain similar traits seem the same. They're not the same. So make sure that whatever you're doing so responsibly. I made a TikTok video about this a while ago about why do you think you need graveyard dirt? So essentially, to sum it up, a lot of people will take it because they think it sounds spooky. They think they have like death juice in the dirt when it's just the topsoil that you're collecting. You can make death dirt, death water. A lot of people will call this war water as well. It's basically a form of baneful magic where you're hexing somebody. You take some sort of animal for sacrificing. They can already be dead, so then that way you don't have that correlation with killing them. But for some people it doesn't matter. You can do it with mice. So if you have trapped mice or something, or if you find like a dead field mouse, that's essentially what I did. And then you freeze dry them. You can do that outside if you have winter. You just basically put them in a jar, and then you use that rotten flesh, you know, that dead carcass, to make war water or death water. You can use it to create death dirt, and then you'll essentially sprinkle that on your enemies, and that's a form of baneful magic. So you can use it for that purpose, but essentially there is no other reason to be collecting graveyard dirt. I think people don't realize that this is on top of a dead person. So when you're going to a graveyard and you're digging up this person, that's extremely disrespectful to the person that's laying there. So when you're taking that soil, you're digging them up. And I don't think people realize this. Now, you can take smaller amounts of graveyard dirt. Of course, if you are working with those spirits. But I think a better way of using that opportunity would be to just do the ritual there in front of that person. So if you're using the grave site specifically for that reason, if you're working with like a baron or the Gereloa, then you can actually just go to the graveyard and do that at the entrance of the graveyard. You don't have to do it on top of someone's grave, which I think would be disrespectful to them because they wouldn't want you to be doing voodoo on top of their grave. You can do that at the entrance of a grave. You can do that at a crossroads at a cemetery. So another thing to keep in mind is that a graveyard and a cemetery are two different things. A graveyard is connected to a church and is consecrated. A cemetery is where people are buried en masse. So cemeteries can be consecrated as well, but if you're doing a ritual or something, or if you need ingredients for a spell, make sure that you understand why you need that specific ingredient and why that matters before you go desecrating someone's grave. Please. So certain things that can be done at a cemetery or at a graveyard. Graveyards, you can use some of that soil for protection. So if you want, you can take some of that graveyard dirt, and keep in mind a graveyard is connected to a church. So that is the church graveyard. Does that make sense? You can take some of that because it would be sanctified earth and use that for protection. Or what you can do is that you can take some moon water or some holy water, I would recommend. Leave that overnight in the graveyard. And then that will be your own version of holy water or moon water, sacred water for protection. Now, certain things that you can do in a cemetery, this is where people are buried en masse. You can go to a crossroads in a cemetery. So if it's a big cemetery, like with walkways and stuff, go to a place where it creates a cross. Now, keep in mind, a cross isn't only religious to Christianity. A cross is also significant in many cultures. So it signifies not only a crossroads, but it also represents the medicine wheel, the 4 directions. There's a whole bunch of different meanings to the cross besides just Jesus. So you would go to the crossroads in the cemetery, and there you can do certain rituals for banishment, for release, for calling upon spirits to meet you there. So if you're working with like the Geriloa, then you can do that there. So if you're working with the Geriloa, so the Baron Samedi with Maman Brigitte, you can do that there at the crossroads of their cemetery. Because keep in mind that the Baron is the first person that was buried at that cemetery, so they're the person that guards it and protects the cemetery for the rest of the residents there. And if you're someone that honors Dia de los Muertos or All Saints Day, you can do that at a crossroads in a cemetery as well. So that way you can get, your skeleton paint, you can get your marigold flowers and everything, and do your ritual at the crossroads in a cemetery as well. Or you can do it at the entrance too. So I know that was a lot of information. Just know that whatever ritual it is that you're doing, that you make sure that you do your research first and you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it. And just take precautions. Make sure that you take baby steps as well. So if you're someone who's just beginning, there's stuff that you can still do. There's baby steps. And don't, just dive in headfirst into the deep end without knowing what you're doing. Make sure that you have a mentor. If you need one, go get one. There's plenty of people out there who are willing to help you and willing to teach you as well. And then if you're working with a community, with a societe, make sure that you have your community there with you because, certain people will have their covens, and those are the people that you trust with this spirituality, with this form of spiritual path, with your conjuring and everything like that. If you have a coven, if you have a societe, or a group of people that you confide in, you are stronger together. So then that way, when you're working with spirits and you're not sure or you're scared or whatever, if you're working with someone in your community together, you're going to be stronger together, and that way you'll have more protection as well. So I hope this helps, and this is a great start for you practicing divination. Make sure whatever you're doing, you do so safely, and have a happy and safe Halloween. Bye!